welcome to yet another edition of the Sustainability Track here on African Renaissance TV with me, Mohamed Bibaji. Today we are here to talk about transport rights and urban planning, and to have a discussion around this I have a guest who would in turn not become a guest, or depending on the English, this is not his first time here on African Renaissance TV and in fact on the Sustainability Track. To help us form a discussion around this I have Mr. Sulayman Jammeh. Before we get into the nitty-gritties of today's discussion, we will allow him to take a quick 30 seconds of an intro, and then we can kick on the discussion from there. Mr. Jammeh, you're welcome again onto the Sustainability Track.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bayi. It's a pleasure again to be here. My name is Sulayman Jammeh. I'm a Gambian. I studied urban planning BSc and MSc Road and Transport Engineering. So I currently work with the University of the Gambia, and I'm very passionate with transport issues. Very, very passionate with transport, and then urban planning. So I'm really happy to be here today.
Well, indeed, very passionate. The last time you were here, we talked about transportation and sustainability, and where we tried to concentrate more on road transport. But today we are going beyond that. Today we are here to talk about transport rights and urban planning. And to kick on the discussion, I would first say let's define transport rights in the context of urban planning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baji. Yes, so when we say transport rights, it's a very interesting question. What is transport right? Basically, what transport right is, these are rights that are accorded to individuals to have access to affordable, efficient, safe, and reliable transportations depending on their geographical locations. So, it is a right that is accorded to every person, regardless of their physical disabilities, their challenges, their economic situations, for them to have access to transportation that is efficient, that is sustainable, that is safe, and that is reliable. So that's what transportation rights are all about.
Well, that's a very good base to start with. And before we can fine-tune this discussion, I would want us to re-establish another definition here when it comes to sustainability. How do we define sustainability in the face of urban planning?
Thank you very much. So sustainability has become a word now that is used by every Tom, Dick, and Harry. Yes, it is the word for this 21st century because we are confronted with so many issues, ranging from climate change, pollutions, etc. So sustainability in urban planning is, planning for not only the current generations. Any activity that we want to do, we must cater for posterity, that is the future generation. So sustainability in urban planning is the planning for tomorrow. Is the planning for tomorrow. Dealing with situations today, solving our problems today without tampering our future needs. So whatever we are doing today, we need to think about the next 50 years. We need to think about the next 100 years. So that is the principle of sustainability in urban planning. Meaning when we are building roads today, when we are building infrastructures today, what is the prospect? How will it...
It's like the next generation should be in mind.
The next generation should be in mind. Anything that we are doing as far as planning is concerned, we should not only plan for ourselves today, but also for posterity, for those in the future.
Well, that's quite important. Like you said, because whatever actions we take today is like the reactions, there is a future reaction for the next generations to come. And it is important for us to be that sensitive as far as work is concerned, whatever we do as far as we are human beings here in the world. I want us to talk about some roles here. What is the role of an efficient transport public system? That can really go in a long way to supporting what we have, let's say, what someone can call an efficient transport system. Like, how do we relate that to the efficiency as far as residents of a particular city are concerned?
Very good. So when you look at efficient transport system, and also to connect it with sustainability, as I said earlier, we must be able to study it in details, not to just solve current problems. For instance, when you look at transportation, it has to be planned. Over the years, there has been mass exodus of people from rural areas to the urban areas. It's unlike, 50 years ago when most of the people lived in
the rural areas.
But now it's a different phenomenon now. So when that is happening, there are a lot of demands on mobility. There are a lot of demands on transport infrastructures, garages, bus stations, depots, on vehicles. So meaning that we need to plan for these thousands of people for us to mobile them on daily basis, for them to go to their shops, to schools, to workplaces. So if that is supposed to be done, we must think mass transportation system that is sustainable. Because every Tom, Dick and Harry cannot be in your vehicle. So for mass transport systems to be designed, they should be designed in tandem with what? Policies and planning theories. So for instance, if you look at the GTSCD, the bus corporations that we have here, that should be able to transport at least the huge chunk of commuters daily to their workplaces. That's mass, and it must be sexy, it must be attractive for people to actually choose those options. So for public transport to be chosen or selected as an option of mobility, it has to be efficient, it has to be reliable, it has to be safe, it has to be affordable. So all these things
there are a lot of things that would really need to be put in place to arrive at that.
For people to actually say, okay, I really want to use the bus. Because if the bus is hot, the bus is messy, the bus is not safe, there's a high tendency that we cannot encourage you to use the public transport, which is really more sustainable than any form of urban mobility. So it is appropriate to say that yes, urban transportation, for us to actually plan for it for today and tomorrow, mass transport should play the center stage in the process.
That is quite important. So if one is to ask on the issues, what are the main issues as far as you are concerned, from your observation and experience, let's say here in the Gambia, what are the main causes, main challenges as far as transportation is concerned, especially here in the urban centers?
Okay, so as I said earlier, one of the main challenges of our transportation in the urban centers is insufficient mass transportation. Yeah? When I say mass transportation, I'm not saying gele. Yes, somebody will say, okay, it's a mass transportation.
It takes a bigger number.
It's not a mass transportation system. Yeah? It's just like the trotros in Ghana, and then, they call it, in other parts of the world, they call it podas and things like that. But when you look at it from a sustainable aspect, a fleet that can carry almost 60 to 80 people, that's when we will classify as mass transport system.
Here in the Gambia, I think buses will fall into that category.
Buses, okay, so here it's buses that actually fall under that category, but not the vans, not the gelegeles. And those are the huge chunk of what? The transport systems. So meaning that one of the issues we have is insufficient public or mass transport, which is the buses. So the rest of the minivans and the gelegeles, those are insufficient to be able to process individuals according to the demand. So that's one of the issues we have. That's why the travel time is delayed, because somebody will leave your compound, you spend like 1 hour
before to get to your destination.
Get to your destination. 1 hour is even meaningfully small, if you look at it in some sense. 1 hour sometimes it takes you for you to even have a car. Sometimes you get, maybe you come out on the main road, for instance, you struggle like 30 minutes to have a car. Because most of the cars that are passing, they are filled. Because they are just small cars, 14 passengers, 20 passengers. So those are not mass exhibition.
And after you have that access to that car, that the traffic becomes another huge challenge you face.
Yes, because that car is directly proportional to the traffic. Because it's these small cars that culminate into huge traffic. Do you get it? It's unlike a bus that processes 60 people, or a train that can process like 500, 700 people. Can you imagine why other advanced countries are using trains and buses? Have you ever thought of that? That is the solutions. But the gelegeles, the vans, are not the solutions to the main transportation sector.
These are huge problems, and then these problems will translate into not just traffic problems or transportation problems. It will multiply into economic problems, societal problems beyond transport. But the root cause of these problems will tend to be coming from transport, from my understanding now. Okay. But I want to see this, how does urban planning come into play? How will urban planning provide a solution to this?
Yes, urban planning forms the genesis of all other urban activities. Before human beings are actually settled, that's where the urban planners They are the superior thinkers. That's where they think about people, what do they need, all the social activities that they are engaged in. Then urban planners actually have to look at their activities, their transportation demands. So for instance, to actually shrink that urban planning to transport demand, we need to know the mobility data, statistics at least. How many people are moving on daily basis? How many trucks pass here? How many vans pass here? How many gele-geles? The demand, for instance. So when we are forming a new city in which we say, okay, at least this is the demand. So when we have the demand, then we'll be able to provide a mass transport system that will be able to process that demand. So that if you go to a bus station or a terminal, you know, okay, I'm not going to wait for more than 10 minutes because you are captured, you are planned, you are programmed. We know your demand. We know that on Monday, this depot processed 7,000 people. So the fleets, these are the amount of fleets
would be able to carry that 7,000.
But when we don't know the demand, that becomes a problem. So in planning, we kind of forecast. We kind of forecast and say, okay, I think from this place to this place, this is the demand in terms of vehicles. So you see, when that is done, it will be very easy for us to plan the transport systems, because we will be able to know the amount of fleet that is needed to actually process the people. But when we do not know those things, it will be very, very hard. So urban planners have to actually work with transport planners to be able to synchronize all these things in the master plan. It has to be in the master plan. The transport plan has to be in the master plan so that we know, okay, this is where the depot is going to be, this is where the bus stations are going to be, this is where every system of transport has to be. So that when things start rolling, we know that, okay, when the bus leave at this point, they are going to stop at this point. The residents from this place, this is where they are going to get their vehicles. So that's one of the issues again. When you look at Lamen, you know, Busumbala and others, that's why it's very hard to get vehicles there, because there are no ports. We call them ports.
It's like, so people don't in fact know when should I come here, when should I leave. You don't virtually know that.
There are no ports. The only thing, because there are no garages we call ports, so that can actually determine the beginning or the end of trips. You need to have ports, so that people will say, okay, when I go to Busumbala, this place, I will see a car that is going to Serekunda.
And at from this time to this time,
I would have a car. But that is not in Lamen, it's not in Busumbala, it's not in Yundum and other places. It's not there. The garages are not there. So, and then that is a full built-up environment. So in planning, in essence, in planning, meaning that those people, they need to have a garage. Because it's a settlement of its own in which there are no garages. So how do people start their trips? So people will have to come on the road, you know, and then what? Hail the vehicles from there. And that's where you see drop off and pick off becomes
a problem.
Frequent.
So somehow the system has marginalized some of those settlements.
Of course.
And that's a huge challenge.
That's a challenge, yes.
It's interesting to see. But if you want to look at this, I want to see how the drainage systems and then they will fit into this. Like, what are some of the risks what are some of the things that are really causing that drainage as far as we are concerned? When you leave, let's say, places like Lamen, okay, you go to Bakau, Banjul, Serekunda, drainage tends to be a huge challenge there. But how does it come into play?
Yes, as I said, like I said initially, before people settle in an environment, the drainage has to be planned. Like when you have a flat surface, for instance, you do a survey, then you do your policies. For instance, if you go to Brikama, you do before, let's assume that nobody is in Brikama. Let's assume that no one stays in Brikama. But it's a proposed new settlement that the government actually want to take up as an estate or something. There should be geomatic surveys first to look at the topography of the land, the nature, the ecosystems and everything. What do you want to preserve in that ecosystem? Not every estate just come, you know,
and clear everything up.
Everything. I don't know where do they have the temerity to even clear all the land and say, I'm putting up an estate. That is suicidal. It's not sustainable, because we cannot continue clearing our ecosystem for settlements. That's why they have a concept called vernacular architecture. You build with the environment. If there are trees here, the trees will dictate how the shape of your building will be. So that's what happened. So before people settle, that's where the drainage have to be planned. Because one survey was done to know that this is the flow of water. When rain falls, this is the catchment area. This is where all the water will go. So obviously you are going to map that area as a catchment area, as a swamp, probably, if it's a swamp. So that you say, okay, this is an agricultural land. That's where zoning comes in. You say this is not for residential purposes. But it's unfortunate that's not happening.
It's not difficult to in fact differentiate between like zoning in that case to say what is commercial and what is residential in terms of cities that we have around now.
Yes, but that's part of the planning process. We call it zonings. You know, residential, commercial, institutional, educational, administrative, you know, they all have to be spelled out so that we know this is this, this is this. Because when you have a mixed use, there's a lot of constraints with that, and that also leads to traffic congestions, crashes. Because you have a resident here, somebody is sitting at his gate, there's a shop there, there's a truck that is actually exceeding maybe a factory or something. That's chaotic, yeah? That's chaotic. When there is fire, for instance, the factory, a gas station, for instance, is built with residential,
in a residential zone.
Residential built area. So when there are disasters of those nature, it becomes very, very, very fatal. So that's why it's important for us to have zoning. When we have zoning, it's easier to control traffic, because at least when we have an industrial area, when we're putting up a pavement or a road, we know that this road has to be rigid roads, there's the dimension, there's the thickness, there's the structural capacity because of heavy trucks. But when you build a small feeder roads for residents, I mean, there's an industry inside, obviously the road is not going to last long. Do you get it? Because they are always extracting timbers, they are always, you know, putting timbers up. It dilapidates the community. So these are all problems. So that's why zoning becomes very, very important
okay.
in our planning process. So the same thing applies to drainage. When we know the catchment areas, you know that, okay, when there is rain, all the water is actually going to find its way over there. So meaning that we don't want to put structures along the waterway one. We don't want to put people on the waterway.
And it's like that is what is happening practically in some societies here.
Because water has to move by force. If you build on the waterway, water will divert, it will go to another place. So you find out that, oh, places that were not prone to flooding, now they are flooding because where the discharge of water happens, it's not happening there because there are built environment in those places. The catchment area where the water should all go and settle, that place has been backfilled. Story buildings have been erected there. Where do we expect the water to go? Water obviously must go somewhere. So the drainage system should be planned in tandem with that geometric survey to establish the run-off water and where the catchment area is. And those things has to be protected and preserved through regulations, policies, by physical planning, to say that these are waterways and then nobody should actually settle them.
This is quite important. I mean, because it's an interesting part, and then I know all these challenges, we can talk about them from here to I don't know what time, and then we cannot exhaust them. Yeah. They're interesting. But I want to see how creating, let's say, combining different transport modes can be, I mean, a solution sort of. Say you're creating a part for those that are walking, a part for those that are cycling, a part for the public transport system, a part for possibly private transport system, and I know a whole lot of that. Could that combination also work out? Because that is something I think we're missing out here.
Yes, that combination is part of the solutions, of course, for sustainable mobility. We call them active mobilities, the mobilities that you use other than engines, like walking, bicycles, and things like that. And that's important because you have a lot of people, when they have the opportunity to walk to their office, they walk. If they have the opportunity to walk to the market safely without thinking of crashes, without thinking of being dirty, without thinking of being exposed to accidents because you have vehicles everywhere, because vehicles have taken over. There is a concept called demotorization. We have to demotorize our communities because the vehicles they have taken over their communities. Kids cannot go out and play anymore. You know, people cannot go out on our streets, you know, talk as community because vehicles are everywhere. They are parked everywhere. So that's not sustainable, as I said earlier. So what we can do is to encourage other forms of mobilities like walking, and that has to start right from the planning aspect. When you are planning maybe probably a route, you say, okay, can I create a bicycle lane? It's not all about vehicle. You know, people tend to prioritize vehicles so much.
I think that is important. It's like the transportation system is like made for the vehicles, not other forms of transport or other forms of means of transport, or in fact, other people other than human beings, or like other things other than human beings.
Now, let me suck you. You know, sometimes it's very skeptical. You know, when you look at who has rights over the road, yeah, The vehicle think that, this guy is just, just wasting my time.
Where should you cross?
The road. Why don't you just cross the road? I mean, that person is going to the market. That person is going to the market. He has equal right and just. You've got right to access to that public, because road is a public goods. Everybody is entitled to the roads. It's a public goods. So if you are behind the wheel, doesn't mean that you have more rights to the road.
Well, a driver can always say, I pay license, and if this bicycle man or someone working on food does not pay license, so
that doesn't still matter. The person still pay tax. That tax culminates into that road infrastructure. That also build that road infrastructure, and that road is built on their street. He has to cross that road to go to the market. He has to cross that road to go and get food. So what, just because you are behind the cars, just because you are trying to drive, somebody should die. Somebody should not go to the market. And besides, every driver is a pedestrian at some point. Because you are behind the wheel, you can't enter your bedroom with a car.
Yeah, at some point, if you got to work.
You have to park. Somebody also allow you to pass, right? So if you don't allow people to pass, you park the car, you want to cross. Somebody also insulting you. I mean, how do you feel? So that's why when you look at hierarchy of road users and their vulnerabilities, there's a principle that they actually apply. The vulnerable has higher privilege. Like the trucks, for instance, when you look at the truck, the buses, the more vulnerable the road user is, the more privileges they have. Like for instance, if there's an intersection, a human being is there, a truck is there, a car is there, who should pass? The law is saying that it's the human being that should be given the opportunity because it's less vulnerable. If you touch the car, it's a problem. If the car touches, it's a problem. So from there, you have a smaller car. From there, you have a truck. Because that truck, any car that touches the truck,
well, it's like whether it touches you or you touch it is a problem for you.
Yeah, problem. So the more vulnerable they are, the higher chances we give them, the opportunities we give them. So meaning that as far as your road utilization is concerned, pedestrians are very precious. Sometimes, take a break, let the pedestrian pass. That is important.
Well, talking of taking a break, I'm sure not just drivers will take a break, but even us here will take a break because that lady behind the camera is saying it's about time we take our first commercial break, and when we return, we can continue on the discussion with that.
Thank you.
And this will take us to our first commercial break. When we return, the discussion continues. Welcome back from that short commercial. If you are just joining us, this is the Sustainability Track coming your way from the African Renaissance TV with me, Mohammed Bibaji. Today, our topic of discussion is on transportation rights and urban planning. And I have a very important expert taking me through this discussion. And it's going to be an interesting one because this second aspect is going to be my favorite. And I hope you are able to stay with us until the end. Mr. Jammeh, welcome back from the short commercials. I don't know if you were given any refreshment. That should be a norm. If you are not, there is someone responsible for giving that. Whether or not you are giving, I cannot tell. But to kick on the discussion, I want us to look at an important part that we've not. I know we are talking about the challenges, but one of the things that that can be observed from a long distance could be how is the issue of people that are differently abled being marginalized in the transport system? Like, could this be from the urban planners, or this is just the transportation system not really including them in the system?
Okay.
Because we talked about cycling and all other modes, but then it's also important to look at that.
Very much actually. To start with the urban planning, because those are the master planners in which every other thing falls around that. It's part of the universal design principle to incorporate and encapsulate the needs of the differently abled persons. Persons with disabilities, visually impaired, hard of hearing, pregnant women, the old, they must be part of the design thinking. For instance, if you want to put up a public infrastructure, we are not doing those things here. If it is a public infrastructure like, for instance, a college, where every set of human beings are coming there. Meaning that there should be ramps for people with
wheelchairs.
Is that also? That's part of design principles. So urban planners should be aware of those things. And then planning officials should be able to enforce these things. They should have regulations to look at institutional buildings and check those requirements, whether the architectural, programming and anthropometrics have those, design processes. Because everybody should be part and parcel of it. It should not discriminate anybody. That's in terms of the planning aspect. When it comes to the transportation now, yes, mobility, according to research, they said women, suffer more in public transportation. They travel more. Women, have more burden when it comes to access to transportation. Because they travel more, they are likely to travel with kids. They are likely to travel with low gauges. That's women. So we are aware of that. The vulnerable, the old, the wheelchair, those with wheelchairs. Many buses in Europe now, they have a ramp. The terminal, they built in such a way that wheelchairs will be able to enter the bus. That's a policy. The bus cannot be qualified to actually process people if it doesn't have those facilities. But it's unlike our part of the world. I mean, the buses that we have, wheelchairs cannot even enter.
Cannot.
And there is something that's actually happening in the Gambia, which actually, pains me a lot. People with disabilities struggle a lot in accessing
transport networks.
Drivers sometimes do not have the patience to even wait for them. When they know that you are
even if they are willing to pay.
Even if they are willing to pay. And then now that payment, of course, we are going to come to that. Should they even pay for their chair? Some apprentices, the drivers will say, oh, he's going to pay. The space the wheelchair is going to take. Shouldn't your vehicle take care of the wheelchair on top? Don't you have a boat where you can put the wheelchair? You see, the disabled persons, they are having a lot of constraints. And it is high time that we actually look at it and be able to create more awareness around that. If you go to probably Brikama Garage, I'm from Brikama actually, so I have to actually
cite Brikama as an example.
You find out that when women want to travel to Westfield, they struggle. It's the survival of the fittest, and transportation systems should be accessible. There should be equity in transport. So it's like currently what is happening is repugnant when you look at it from a sense of discrimination towards women, kids, and the elderly people. Because there is struggle in transport access. When you go to Brikama Garage, you want to go to Westfield. If you are not strong, you're going to have access to transport.
Yeah, especially in the rush hours.
In the rush hours, yes. If you are not strong, you can't have access to transportation. There's inequity in those things. So it's only the fit, the strong, that will be able to actually access transport. And that is wrong. So even a lady have to struggle. So what of somebody who is disabled, who is in the wheelchair?
That's quite important.
Lady who is strong enough is not even accessing transport. What of somebody on the wheelchair?
Most definitely, you don't get to go with that.
Sit down for 3 hours. When things calm down, they talk to people. Can you help me? No, we have to program our transportation. That's why we need to develop queuing systems. When you come, let's queue. A disabled person comes, visually impaired. You queue, you get your ticket, you access transportation. So
it's like in that way, like we all have like that equal rights and access to the transportation network.
Because when a wheelchair person comes, a disabled person comes, he will be able to buy his tickets and be on the queue. He has his ticket number 13. He knows that he's having a seat there. Whether you are going to wait for him to struggle and go up, but he has to access transport. So that's the informal sector. So we have to inject formality in the informal sector, because you have two types of transport. When I say public transport, you have two: the informal and the public, and the formal transport. The formal transport is like the GTSC. They are formal. They have structures. The drivers have uniforms. They have schedules. They have ticketing, etc. That's beautiful, and they have schedules. But the informal sector, we call it the hardcore transport. That's where the hooliganism, the theft, the robbery, the banditry, everything happens in the garages. So when we don't inject formality in those processes, it will be chaotic, and there will be injustice, there will be discrimination, there will be inequity.
Talking of chaotic, I want to look at this. Like, how would you consider estates? Now we have a lot of them coming massively in this era and time in the Gambia. What is their role in this? Are they contributing to some of these problems, or this is an inbuilt problem that they are only adding up to?
Yes. The issue of the estates, this estate is a topic of its own. And I will recommend for us to have
we must definitely will have one on it.
The synopsis, to be quite honest with you, I'm not happy the way estates have been proliferated in this country. The way they are not controlled. I mean, what is an estate, in fact? Estate is a virgin land that you have added value on the land, and then you resell it. But in the Gambia, you don't add any value on lands. You just come and clear bushes, you say it's an estate.
It's an empty land that is acquired and resold at a higher price.
You demarcate it to your own whims and caprices and say, oh, it's going to be 25 by 20. I mean, you people are going to stay here for the rest of your life without a market, without hospitals, social amenities, religious centers. There is no point of socialization in estates.
It's like there is no reservation made for recreational centers or recreational facilities.
The estates that we are having are like, they are like kind of, ghost towns. When you go, everybody, you just go and sleep. There is no life in it. There is no health, in fact, in it. If you are living in an estate, you should have a place to go jog, a park with kids, so that your mind can be healthy. Do you understand? In Latin, they call mens sano in corpore sano. Healthy minds are driven from healthy bodies. Because the estate is telling you, you cannot even jog. Where will you jog? On the tar road that is not even paved, where cars are dancing balak zanku. That's where you want to.
But let's see this. Like you are an expert as far as transport is concerned, an urban planner to be precise. And we have like an urban planning authority as far as a planning authority rather in the Gambia. So what is their role in this?
The urban planners and then the planning authorities, especially the Department of Physical Planning, have a very instrumental role to play. They cannot be out of the equation. The Department of Physical Planning, right from the genesis of formulating these estates, physical planning have to take the lead. If you are a developer, you need to register, and they need to see your land.
Physically, inside, you have to site it physically.
Visit the site.
Okay.
They need to see your demarcations. What percentage of your land is for residency? What percentage of the land is for roads? What percentage is for amenities? There are standards in other countries what they put. Some will say, okay, 30 to 40% are going to be roads, and social amenities, while your 60% you do it for built environment. Some will have different schedules, but those standards must be there, so that you cannot just demarcate 500 by 500 and just put it.
It's like the pieces of land are just shared amongst people, and then that is 100% shared on residents. Like there is no catering for the roads, for infrastructure, for other infrastructures like recreational centers.
There is absolutely nothing, and that's a problem, because when we will know this, trust me, you will tell me that, Sulayman, you once told me this. In the next couple of years, when Estate A joins with Estate B, Estate C, it turned into big settlements. It's like a city now. And in this city, one hasn't done any planning process right from the genesis. B, C, they have not all done anything. So when all these estates connect, we find out, oh, there's a population of like 7,000 people. There are no hospitals, there are no schools, there are no parks. Who should ask that question? It is the time. This is the time in which the planning
we must start asking questions now.
On the occasion, and then deal with these issues. Because according to GBO's statistics, an average household size in this country, I think 8.2 persons per compound. So if you have an estate, you are having like almost 100 and something plus. You times that by 9. We are looking at a huge population. Then those populations have rights to access these amenities.
I don't mean to cut you, but then if you are to focus from today, in the next, say, 5 years time, what are some of the main problems that we can face if we don't solve these issues as far as estates are concerned? Good.
We've started facing them because of flooding. You can see, I don't want to name estates here, but you can see, imagine new estates where flooding happens. 21st century, we are dealing with 21st century crisis in the Gambia here. And imagine estates where we are thinking that all the ingenuity, the skills, and the planning should be in. Serious floodings are happening in estates. That's a challenge. Tells you that that's a challenge. So when we don't deal with these things from the drawing board, we are going to continue having problems with flooding, with pollutions, crime rates, and then everything. And before you know it, turns into slums. Criminality will increase.
Well, I've always heard of this word, slums. Well, in a precise manner, what would it mean?
No, slums basically, they are places where there are no amenities, there are no social infrastructures. It's not planned and it's not organized. Every Tom, Dick and Harry built anything. Toilet is here, kitchen is there are schools there, gutters are there, kids are playing on slots. That's how slums are. And it's a very, very bad sample.
Those are societies that we tend to really want to avoid as a people. And then, for the interest of time, I would love us to talk of the ultimate solution to this. What can we learn from the part of the world that have an efficient transport system, and especially in the urban centers? In a minute.
Okay, so what we can learn from other countries, for instance, let's look at it from a spectrum of gender. Women suffer a lot in transportation. For instance, in India, in New Delhi, public transportation is made free for women. That's good. That is good. In Luxembourg, public transportation is made free for every individual in Luxembourg. That is important because they have seen transportation as a right.
As an important part.
Very important component. Politicians should be drafting transportation, their policies revolving around transportation. Easy. When you put up a manifesto, we have not seen transportation as a crisis, as a problem, and in which you are prescribing solutions to, there's a gap. They should be thinking of their plan towards public transportation. That is important. Secondly, when you look at the urban planning aspects, the Department of Fiscal Planning is charged with development control. When you say, okay, this is a TDA, for instance, there should be no infrastructures there. If you want to build, the development permits are issued by the Department of Fiscal Planning. They need to rise to the occasion to be able to deal with that. Of course, we are aware of the enormous challenges that they face. Some will tell you they are insufficient manpower, some mobility issues and things like that. But they are charged with those responsibilities.
But because the prices we are going to pay if these things are not solved now, is going to be higher than what we are.
It's going to be higher than their current challenges. So because we don't want to have a lot of settlements that are unplanned. A lot of settlements where even when somebody died, to bury the individual is a problem. It's sudden. A corpse will be transported from one settlement to another. Oh, he's not a resident over here. Why are you bringing him here? We close our graveyard. Because that settlement, about 3,000-4,000 people, there is no graveyard. Who are responsible for that? It's the estates. Because you are bringing people. We are giving so much power to estate officers. They are not a planner, they are not planners, but they have the power to tell you, look, I'm going to make you settle in 20 by 12 with your family for the rest of your life. Without water, electricity, schools, amenities, they have the power. Technically, they are executing that powers. And the government probably is not aware of that, or maybe they're not doing much about it. But we don't give powers to estate officers that way. When they have their plan, they come, we put them through those checks. There should be standards, regulations, standard operating procedures as to how you demarcate, what are the standard lands and road sizes in estates. But sometimes you see 6 meters, a road. Is that a road?
That is not qualified to be a road, at least not in the standard road.
We need to have standards. When you demarcate it, we say at least we have 8-9 meters as a road, as a community road. What do we need? We need drains at least when you are doing this. Don't build on the drain or drainages. These are all things that we need to put. If it is not there, it's going to be pretty much hard.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's edition coming from the Sustainability Track. And do stay tuned for more interesting episodes and programs from the African Renaissance TV. And this program and TV is open to partnerships and collaborations for programs of valuable things as far as our society is concerned. Here within the Gambia and going ahead to the African sphere. Until we come your way again, I am Mohammed Bibaji.